Welcome to API Futures, a podcast by Ascend where we empower global leaders of tomorrow. Here's our guest host for this episode.
I'm Suneera Madhani, and I'm the founder of Stax Payments and the founder of CEO School and host of the Top 100 show, the CEO School podcast. I am your special guest host for today, and I am so excited to be here because we are going to be introducing and interviewing Maneet Ahuja. Maneet is just incredible. I mean, her background, she is the editor-at-large at Forbes. She covers the intersection of Wall Street billionaires and entrepreneurial capitalism. She's also the founder of Iconoclast, Forbes' premier global investor summit that convenes the world's most iconic industry titans, institutional investors, deal makers, and celebrities with collectively over 20 trillion in assets under management for high-level conversations on the most critical issues impacting our economy and markets today. I'm just so excited to have a fellow API woman here who is crushing the game in her space and having an honest conversation about what's taking place in the field of finance in Wall Street, what's happening at Forbes in our world, as well as really talking about API health today. Maneet, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to be here today.
Suneera, I can't thank you enough. And when I found out that I was going to be speaking to you, I literally squealed with delight. I was so excited because I've been following your journey for a long time. Obviously, we've covered you extensively in Stax, in Forbes, and you've been a part of our Forbes women community and a speaker at many of our summits, like our 30 Under 30 summit, our 30-50 summit in Abu Dhabi. We've used your story as an inspiration for so many women and founders, not just female founders, entrepreneurs, visionaries across the board. So I could not be more thrilled to be here with you today and to be talking about, all of the issues that our community faces and our combined stories. So thank you so much for having me.
I love this. I feel like this is going to be like the best friend coffee chat here today. And so this is going to be so great. Maneet, I agree with you. Take us back to your journeys. I'd love to hear about like your background, how, your amazing journey that you've had into now being the editor-at-large at Forbes.
Sure. So, I fell into media very serendipitously, but I really fell into it. Every stage of my career, I feel like has been very serendipitous. And for that, I have to just say, I'm so grateful to God. And so God has been at the front and the foundation for my life, because it's literally, you couldn't make this stuff up. But I started actually on Wall Street when I was 17 years old, which is how I got my nickname and my social handle, Wall Street Maneet. I thought I was going to be a bank teller and as an internship. And it turns out it was an internship in investment banking. And when you're 17, you don't know what investment banking is. And it was just kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity. The lady I was working for, this was like early 2000 period. It was very much like button down Wall Street. She did not disclose that she decided not to come back after maternity leave. So it was supposed to be 3 months. It ended up being 4 years. And I was working on billion-dollar deals. And I graduated when the financial crisis was just heating up and then ended up getting laid off. And for these like very high profile investment banking analyst positions, they're recruiting at the top Ivy League schools like once a year. So it was off cycle when you got laid off. And I remember I was just like, I didn't know what to do because, as Indians, we're type A, like overachievers, South Asian, the entire community. And to work so hard all throughout college and then now to graduate into this position where like I was laid off as a part of a broader, just preparing for the financial crisis. I didn't know what to do. And I saw an opening at the Wall Street Journal and they needed a financial expert for the money and investing team. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to apply to Harvard Business School because I'm off cycle and I'll just hang out at the Wall Street Journal for the 6-7 months in between. And I'm going to get into Harvard. And that's what I'm going to do because I was this super type A. And I remember at that time, Dow Jones had a partnership with CNBC. They just kept featuring the stories I was writing about at the Wall Street Journal. and they cold called me, and I thought they called me in for an interview to go on CNBC because we had a partnership to talk about my stories. But they actually called me in for an interview. So I walked in and I thought I was going to the set, and they walked me upstairs to HR, and I'm like, what's going on? And it kind of was like, okay, well, I didn't plan media. I was ready to go back to Wall Street, but the crisis was taking a long time the economy was taking a while to get back on its feet. And I said, let me just give it a shot. And the first story I worked on at CNBC was with David Einhorn on Lehman Brothers with the bank collapse. Nobody believed that the bank would go under. It was just like a storied financial institution. And this was like this relatively not well-known short seller who the market was casting as this like evil short seller trying to bring down Wall Street. And then it was just off to the races because it turned out that Lehman Brothers was financially unstable. That kind of was a very fortuitous timing that opened the entryway to all of these activist investors and billionaires who otherwise didn't really engage with the media, but felt like I already had street cred as a 21-year-old because I was able to work on one of the biggest stories during the financial crisis.
I feel like I could see young Maneet, and I feel like we're exactly the same person. And this is like the love of like truly like two API sisters. I totally understand everything you said. And I think the audience listening, like when you talked about, us being overachievers, like I actually graduated in 2009 and it was not a good job market. I literally have gone through very similar experience, different in my path. And that's how I actually ended up working for a credit card processing company. It was like never on the agenda. I wanted to actually go work in Wall Street, and I was a finance major, and I wanted to move to New York. Like that was the dream for me. I love what you said first, even about like, I do believe in like the universe does have a path for us. And I'm so grateful for the path that it put me on because my journey would not have been where I am today if that crisis actually did not happen. Like if I didn't end up going into finance, I ended up starting a fintech, but it kind of came back full circle because it started with my career in corporate working for like a payments company. And so I totally fully relate to all the things. And I have to say, even you talking about that your determination being like, oh, I'm going to take a break. I got laid off. Like I'm just going to say it out loud. Like brown girl here being like, no, I'm just going to go apply to Harvard. So your parents aren't like, what are you doing without a job in between this? I love that. My mom, okay, so really fun. I'm going to share this. My mom I exited a business north of $1 billion. Like I have done things, my brother and I. So, my brother and I were also immigrant kids. We did the college thing. It is such an important thing to go get your education. Like that's why our parents like brought us here to this country so that we had different opportunities than they did. And that's why the career, like the forcing of like the doctor, the engineer, the whatever, it's because it's freedom, right? It's safety, it's freedom, it's all of that. And when I started my company, my dad was super like, you need to go do this. But my mom still to this day is like, you don't have your MBA. You need to move back and get your MBA.
Yeah, that is every brown girl mom, brown girl entire family.
I feel it. I feel this. I love this conversation. Okay. Thank you so much for this, the podcast this end, because you just made two best friends. We have this like figure it out mentality. And that's exactly, it's like, that's what takes even for entrepreneurship. Like people ask me all the time of like what it took for success. And I'm like, we just didn't give up. Like our resiliency is like next level. And if there's a problem, there's going to be a million problems. It's just, we solve it and then we move on to the next day.
It's also like, there is no other option. Like we don't have a trust fund to look to, right? My dad came here. He slept in a car. He lost, somebody owed him $100 in a bet. He was working at a factory in Germany. He came from Amritsar. My mom had an arranged marriage to my dad. If it didn't work out for us, there was nobody to turn to, right? Like my mom, again, she was like, just have an arranged marriage. I have the guy right here. And so for me, like failure just was not an option, right? Like this wasn't an industry that I knew anything about. It wasn't Wall Street or media, but it was just like, you just had to keep failing until you could keep your head afloat, and pave your own path, right?
Totally. I'd love to kind of come back to how did you end up? So tell me after Wall Street Journal, you're covering all of this. How'd you get to Forbes?
Yeah, so I had spent like a decade at CNBC. I launched all of our coverage on hedge funds, and what that really means is secretive billionaires, and wrote my book Alpha Masters, got on the Forbes 30 under 30 list, co-launched CNBC's events business with our version of a Davos meets Milken, delivering alpha, which kind of became the precursor for what I built at Forbes, Iconoclast. And then I decided, again, similar to your story, my parents were always like, you never went back for your MBA. Like, I'm like, Mom, I have a best-selling book. I've created $100 million revenue stream. Like, I have the ear of the most secretive billionaires in the world. Does this mean nothing? Like, nothing, unless you have that MBA. So I just kind of did a hybrid version of that in the media industry, business journalism. There's a fellowship at Columbia with the business school and the journalism school called the Knight Badgett Fellowship. And it's one of the most competitive in the world, or I think it's the most academically rigorous. They only pick 10 students from across the world each year, but it's like a free ride for your MBA, and you have journalism seminar. And so I decided after, 10 years, I think sometimes you catch magic in a bottle. And for me, the magic in a bottle was the financial crisis. And even though it was such a stressful period, then you look back and you're like, wow, what I was able to achieve during that moment of stress, you can't necessarily replicate it when the market has recovered, or people have acclimated to expect that level of success from you, right? And so there's so many intangibles.
That's it. Put that on a t-shirt right there. I agree with that 100%. And even just the pressures of even when you do have that name and are successful, and putting that expectation does not go away, and that there is that additional stress and pressure there. That's such a good point. That stress, like even post that cycle, I mean, we just went through this even with COVID, right? I mean, and just, I would say just the pressures overall of even being different. I'd love to kind of, talk a little bit about that, of not having a seat at the table. How did you forge your path to get that seat?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think and I talked to a lot of the mentors that I've had that have been so fortunate. I think that's one of the good things about being in media, is that you get to build, if you connect authentically, you get to build authentic relationships, after the story is done, because while you're doing the story, you need to kind of have that Chinese wall, so to speak, that division. But with some of the most incredible people in the world, like Sheryl Sandberg or Melody Hobson, who I count as two of my mentors, and I think it is always polarizing to be the only woman in the room, and especially the only woman of color. But sometimes just the fact that you're different and have a different perspective does work to your advantage. I mean, I do remember like early days on Wall Street, especially working on a trading floor, you need to find a way to make your voice heard. I don't have time to worry about if people like what I'm saying, because it's kind of a kill or be killed environment or mentality. And so it didn't really matter if you didn't make friends, because it was such a harsh environment. But it's death by 1,000 paper cuts if you don't speak up. And so I kind of think just being thrown in the deep end early on prepared me then for media. So going into broadcast at CNBC, I think during that period, you're fighting against all of these unconscious bias and stereotypes where, people want to hear news from the girl next door or the boy next door. And if there is a minority that is represented, there's only room for one. And then I think just showing and not telling, I just put my head down and I was like, okay, if everybody else is going to the right, I'm going to veer to the left. If everyone is chasing Warren Buffett for an interview, I'm going to find who's the next Warren Buffett, or the billionaire who's nobody's ever been able to pin down. And so I kind of just forced my way through by delivering the content that nobody else was able to deliver. And then being like, it doesn't matter if my package is not, I'm not the girl next door. I'm the girl who got you the story.
Oh my God, I have chills with listening to this. You're so incredible. You are so incredibly young too. And I love that. I feel like that is one of the things that I love surprising people with, When people don't know, they haven't seen me, they don't know my age or my height. I'm 5 feet tall. I'm a brown woman, right? And then here you have a financial technology company that I've built. We had, 40,000 customers on the platform. We had 40 billion in payments running through the system. And then we made deals with like the largest software companies. And then I'll walk into the room and it's like, here's this like non-traditional CEO. What you said about being different, I think that I agree with that being different is your superpower. And instead of being, and there are a lot of, there are challenges. I do know so many women that struggle with just not being able to get into the right rooms in leadership and things like that. But I will say you have to find a way to like break through that noise. But I love that thrill of the surprise where it's like, oh my God, like that's the CEO of the company. And for the longest time, so many times, like I would walk in and they would think I was like the secretary and they would assume that I was like the event planner. I've literally went to my first, I'll share the story with you here. My first, venture, it was like our CEO roundtable for our portfolio, like for the portfolio companies for, post our Series A. We had, amazing investors that backed us, and they have this annual CEO retreat thing that they do. And so they had just finished our diligence. We had just done our announcement. It had not gone out publicly, but they were like, our event is like in 2 weeks. We're like, of course. So we show up and I'm like super excited. I've like not been in a room full of like CEOs. Like it's so lonely being an entrepreneur, and it's lonely for so many different things, but I was so excited to be there. And I was standing outside. I was showed up early and I got an important call. So I was outside on the phone in front of where like the registration was. So it's like, and like one CEO pulls up and like, in their car and their SUV, it gets dropped off and then comes and like taps me. It's like, oh, which way is like and I'm like, okay, it's like over here, like not thinking anything of it. It happens again. And then like the third time somebody stopped me to be like, where do I go get my badge? And I'm like, I don't know. I walk inside and like the first introduction is of like, their newest portfolio company CEOs, of Stax, Suneera Madhani. And I like stand up and you should see the look on the guys' faces. Oh my God. At one point, like it's frustrating, but it's also like, yeah, I'm here. Let's go.
No, I mean, you so wonderfully just told this story. I actually read this anecdote about you and I was literally shaking my head because I had the exact same thing just happen to me a few weeks ago. And it was a big career moment for me too. So I'm working on a cover story for Forbes, and that's part of what I do too, is I write some big profiles and cover stories. And it took me to the Golden Globes. And because of that, I was at the lobby of the hotel and I was really excited because it was a big journey, because not only was I just at the Golden Globes, but I was going to be seated at the head table. And the reason that was significant is it wasn't even on my vision board. I wasn't manifesting it. It just showed that my work had spoken for itself, that I got into a room that I otherwise had never expected to ever be in and wasn't aspiring to be in. And I was at the front desk and 2 hotel guests come up and they asked me to call the manager. And I was meeting the hair and makeup lady to take her upstairs to do my hair and makeup. So I was just in my sweats, but all black. I guess it looked like a hotel uniform. And then another person came down and was like, no, we need to speak to the manager right now. And I'm like, why are they asking me to call the manager of the hotel? And, I got really upset. And then I was just like, you know what? Why I'm here is so much bigger than what they see of me at like 9 a.m. in the morning, and their stereotype. It's not even worth clearing it up. And I just said, the manager's over here. I'm going to go up to my room now. And so, I mean, I think we all have these types of stories that we can relate to. And it's just unfortunate. I just feel bad for people that are so small-minded that they have certain assumptions of what, and there's nothing wrong with working at the hotel or being an event planner, right? It's just, I actually really enjoy, and I did see them when I came back down and I was dressed up to go out, and I just happened to be in the elevator with them. And I don't even know if they recognized me after my hair and makeup was done. But, that's just the facts speaking for themselves.
No, I mean, I think this is where like the coffee chat needs to turn into the wine chat, so we could share some deeper stories outside of the show.
Right.
There are stereotypes, there are barriers, and it is harder. Can you share what it's like in the editorial room, right? Like, what is it like in the editorial room? You're bringing stories. Now you get to make the decisions, but is it still, what's it like in there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's a really complicated environment and landscape for media in general right now. I think we're dealing with, on the one hand, there's a lack of trust of the media inherently. And then you deal with the brand specifically, right? Like each brand is known to cover certain verticals. So I think, what I am encouraged by is that we are making deeper inroads and more of a commitment towards telling the stories of our community now more than ever. And so I'm just going to soft mention it here, but I'm really proud that now as a part of my new role as editor-at-large, I'm also going to be launching and overseeing a new platform for storytelling for AAPI voices. And so I'll be able to share more details on that in the coming months, especially as we gear up for AAPI month in May. But it's going to be a very fundamental and large commitment and a hub, so to speak, for Forbes for all of our stories in a really important way. And you think about, other communities, we are an umbrella of cultures and communities. We're not just South Asian, we're the whole entire continent, right? And so there's so many different cultures that we need to account for. But also, one of our strengths is, I was just looking at the stats, we have 40 Fortune 500 CEOs. 40. And so I'm going to make it a part of my mission to get all of these CEOs together to join in our collective and to help uplift our entire community. Maybe I won't get all 40, but if I'm targeting 40, even if I got 10 Fortune 500 CEOs, that's pretty badass.
You are I'm not surprised that this is the direction and how passionate you are. And this is why it is important, right? It is important for us to, I do believe, I always talked about as an entrepreneur when I started my business, it was, freedom of dollar is a huge piece of why, of scaling and wanting to have that, that freedom. But then it became so much more about freedom of time, right? After I became a mother, it wasn't just the chase of I really wanted to make a name for myself. And I say freedom of influence is actually, for me, it was just as important. So it was obviously the mission and everything we did as a company, but the influence around, I used to shy away from the word influence. And I have a large social following, entrepreneur. I think in 2021, I was given 100 most influential women, and it was J-Lo, and it was the most ridiculous list. And I was me, influence. And I always felt this word was, I didn't associate myself in a positive connotation for as an influencer, because I was so strong in proving myself as a CEO. That was so hard for me, growing my business, scaling my business. But I always felt that I had this chip on my shoulder to prove my worth in every stage, every story, every whatever. And the word influence, I didn't like it because I just didn't associate it correctly. I was I was a CEO, not just for the influencer part of me. I didn't really like to share that. And it was a huge moment for me to really think about the word influence. It is so important. And it's not just important that it is important that we're successful, that we do drive wealth for our communities, that we do have that, those freedoms. But without, it is also important to have that power. Everyone listening here, when one of us rises, we all rise together. It's exactly we're literally going to sit here after this, and this friendship is obviously very clear from here, but we're going to connect. We're probably going to collaborate on something. I'm going to pay attention to, if something's happening, I'm going to send it over to you. You're going to look out for me as well, right? There's this natural sense of community that takes place. And it is so important to be in the right rooms, and our voice and our influence is so important in that decision making. And it's not just for South Asian, exactly what you said for AAPI, right? It's the entire continent, and we have a representative that is using her voice to represent all of us. And like, look at the magic that's coming from it. It is the best feeling. Like I could get really emotional about this. And especially like after a mom, I'm like emotional about everything. But like, especially when I think about my kids and your son and my kids, I think that the world is going to look differently. And I hope that the world will look differently for them. And this is where it happens when you're in the right rooms and we have that influence and we have that power and we have those freedoms of it all. And so it is important to, and it's in our blood. Like we are those type A overachievers right now. In full transparency, my brother and I are working on our next company. It's going to get announced really soon. We're really, really pumped. I cannot wait to share what we're doing in fintech and what is like that'll be for another conversation. But I do believe that like we were set, like once you've done it, there's also so many lessons I've learned in this last decade. Like I'm not done, right? Like I'm 36 years old. Like what am I going to do for the rest of my life? Like I want to make sure that our knowledge, our community, our experiences, like we can make a legacy and like really change the way the world operates. And my world and your world is, journalism and media. And my world is financial services, right? Like I know that space and I know what's taking place and I've been on every single side of it. And so I just feel very inspired to just bring like just what you said about being at the top. Like it is important that we all succeed and have our voices in the room. And I'm just so proud that you are at the top leading this. And I cannot wait to see what you do with all the conferences you put together, what you're doing at the top. It's so important. And I want to say thank you on behalf of the entire API community. It's incredible to see you win.
Congratulations, by the way. I can't wait to hear about this. You got to promise Forbes the exclusive when it's ready to get announced. And I have to say the same thing right back at you, right? Because you look at, I think that we breathe life into each other by seeing all the successes of our brothers and sisters in our community, right? And when you just forge that sisterhood and that chosen friendship with your community, sometimes it's even deeper than family, right? Because I see what you've done. You've built $1 billion business. You're not done. You're a serial entrepreneur. You're going to probably launch more than 1, 2, or 3 or more businesses next. You launch a successful podcast. And so I look to see what you and other people in our community have done. And I mean, that's what inspires me, is that like there really is no limit, no end to the possibilities. And so basically though, like at the same time where we're doing so much, we're achieving so much, there's a lot of pressure. And I think one of the things that isn't spoken about still as much is like mental health. And I think it's just now, I mean, especially for our community, I feel like we're supposed to be super tough, right? It's almost something that's like never acknowledged. And I could just speak on behalf of, my personal background. You can see it through the generations where it's almost this unsaid thing. And we each have our own issues to deal with. And our parents have had issues, and you don't want to connect that to yourself. So I remember when I was pregnant with Devin, and that's when I was doing the Night Badget Fellowship that eventually led me to Forbes. I was like, listen, I don't have any, I'm fortunate. I don't have any active trauma, but I know as a child how important it is to feel safe and to feel like your parents are that safe space for you as much as possible. And so I went to therapy, and I was just like, I just want to I'm conditioning my body, right? I'm feeding myself in the right way so that my child will be healthy. But I want to create a healthy, mental space for him so that, whatever generational trauma there was, as much as possible, I can try not to extend that into his life, because, he doesn't deserve that. And again, it wasn't even that bad, but I'm so glad that I did that. And I feel like that was when I was pregnant, 2019. From then until now, there's been, I feel like, a shift where it is becoming more acceptable to talk about mental health and making it a priority. So I would love to hear from you too, right? You're a mom, you're running $1 billion business, you're running a media empire now. It can be a lot.
It is a lot, right? It is a lot. And actually, what's interesting is Ascend actually just released a new report on specifically API mental health. It's called Understanding Our Diverse Needs. And basically the report found that you're going to just, I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised. Overall, APIs reported their mental health is actually, well, when we look at the numbers, it's actually worse for us as APIs than it is for the average American. So average American reporting fair to poor mental health was around 25%. And for APIs, it was almost 40%, 39% of APIs reported on their like poor mental health. And that's even worse for API women, right? So API women reported worse mental health than men as well. And that is something that I feel like we can all relate to. It's mental health is not something that was ever like discussed in our homes, right? Like we were each other's therapists, right? Therapy was not something that you talk about. Even with all the stress, like there was a lot of stress. There is a lot of stress. And it wasn't, when you think about the generational, we talk about the word generational trauma, or you think about the pressures of being an immigrant kid, there are those real pressures, right? I mean, and it's not to our parents' fault. They had to come here with absolutely nothing. The pressures of making it happen, the hard work piece, like all the things that make us who we are also drivers of our success.
Yeah. There was a time for mental health. Like there was no time, right? We didn't have the ability to even focus on that. So growing up, like I don't fault my parents either, right? Like they did what they needed to survive. Like mental health was a luxury. But we're the beneficiaries of the world that they created. So we can afford that luxury and we need to.
Even just the conversations, right? Of even having these conversations to say it is important. I am surprised at this survey. This is a pretty strong statistic, right? So it's literally say, 1 in 2, right? Almost like it's a pretty large number of every person you meet, for every 3 people, 1 for sure has a mental health challenge within our community. We have to be talking more about this, and we have to take active measures to protect our mental health too. And the thing that I would say, the biggest thing that I'm learning about myself is boundaries. Honestly, the word no is the hardest thing, especially as a South Asian woman, to do, is to say the word no. Like we've always been conditioned to say yes, to like put us, like a bright face on, to show up. Like we're always going out of our way to make stuff happen. And that's honestly just in transparency. I'm not perfect at it, but that is like the one active thing that I am really, really working on, is protecting boundaries, protecting time, and also being okay for letting go of opportunities. There are so many opportunities that also come knocking at the door. And I can't be everywhere, right? Like next week actually is my kid's ski break, and I'm invited to speak at the NBA crossover for the NBA All-Star game. It is a dream. Like, of course I want to go speak at the NBA. This is going to be so incredible. I get to go to the All-Star game. Like, it's going to be amazing. I had said yes, but it literally overlaps with my kid's ski break. And at first I'm like, oh, I'm going to fly in and back. Like I'm going to miss the day of a 1 day of vacation, come there and back. And I was literally bending over backwards to make this event happen, to sit on a panel for something that it's going to be great, but there will be other opportunities.
100%. It's that PTSD of all those years where you looked at other people and you were happy for them, but you were waiting for your moment, right? And then that's the same thing that I deal with now. It's that scarcity mindset where like, oh my God, I don't know how long the good times are going to last. I need to say yes to everything. I literally had the same thing happen, and that's why I might have a herniated disc in my neck. I went from Davos straight to Miami for a day, and I fell asleep on my hand on the flight to Davos overnight, and my hand was asleep, and then I ended up in the hospital, and then I still went to Miami, and I didn't cancel because I didn't want to disappoint, the 2 keynote interviews that I had to do on stage.
And I love this transparent dialogue here. And I think a lot of us listening can relate to this. And just overall I think everyone can relate. Every successful person can also relate to this. And just a reminder, it is super, super important. And you know what? Even just, it is important to talk to someone, but even having that community, right? So just even sharing this and having our friends support us and our colleagues support us with those boundaries, and having the team to support us as well is like super critical, super important. So just a reminder out here, I'm sure they're going to plug in that study into the show notes. So take a look at that. And let's check in with each other, right? Let's check in with ourselves every day too, to say, when is it enough? right? And that, I think we can literally carry this episode for another hour. And I know time is running out. We will be back to complete this to further this conversation. But a reminder to us all, it's amazing. The achievement is so incredible. And you can hear my passion for Maneet and what's happening here. And I know we're here to completely just support each other to this next level. I'm so appreciative of Ascend and this podcast. This is incredible. Let's carry the conversation offline now. You can find me on Instagram. You can also find Maneet on Instagram. You can find me at Suneera Madhani, and Maneet is Wall Street Maneet. So you can message us. We're both on LinkedIn, and we can carry the conversation further outside of this. And I cannot wait to see Maneet, all your success ahead. And I know you're excited about all the things that I'm building too.
100%. You are a beacon for our industry or for our community. And I can't wait to continue to champion and support you and to tell your story to the world. So thank you so much to Ascend and to Suneera. It was a great honor to be here with you guys today. And I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Subscribe to API Futures on Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple. Thanks for listening to API Futures, presented by Ascend, where we empower global leaders of tomorrow.